Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of MINT's webinar series, Pivot or Perish. My name is Anil Padmanabhan and I will be co-hosting this episode with my colleague Debashri Chakki. There is no gainsaying that the COVID pandemic has brought the world and the Indian economy to its knees. And within this, the automobile sector has borne the brunt of this savage blow to the economy. In last month, for example, there were zero sales. So it's the kind of challenge which many believe is not a one-off shock and is going to set in flow fundamental structural change in the way we behave, the way we consume, and the way industry conducts itself, or we all conduct ourselves. So to understand this and more, as always, we have lined up a great panel. The way that we have structured the show is we have got Mr. Bhargava, who will kick off the whole proceedings with an opening address. Thereafter, he'll be joined by my colleague, Mr. Chakki, and and the other panelists. So Mr. Bhargava is already on the screen. He hardly needs an introduction. I think the entire modern contemporary automobile industry in India and his timeline is associated with his timeline. So, Mr. Bhargava, welcome to the show, and it's an honor to host you. Sir, if I could request you to deliver the opening address, and then I could come back to you to take this up further. Thank you, Mr. Bhargava.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to everybody. As Mr. Padmanabhan said, the coronavirus has made us all relook and change the way we live our lives. I don't think we had ever imagined 2 months ago what it would be like to live in a lockdown. We didn't even know what a lockdown was at that time because it had never happened in my lifetime. And that has shown us how the whole way we live, the way we behave, the way we go out, the way we interact with people, the way we conduct meetings, all of that has undergone a change already in a short period of 4 to 5 weeks. And that has been the impact of this virus. I think it also reveals many of the weaknesses which were, in a sense, inherent and apparent in the Indian industry, and which over all these last 70 years have prevented Indian industry generally becoming a highly competitive industry as far as the global manufacturing scene is concerned. We have always wanted, at least for the last 30 years, to attract foreign direct investment into India in the manufacturing sector. There have been numerous delegations led by ministers which have gone abroad seeking foreign investment. The result has been really quite small and nothing like what could have happened. Even now, when industry in the last couple of years or 3 years has been shifting out of China, the bulk of it has gone to places other than India. Very few companies have come to India. And I think that was something which was already there. And we need to see now that this opportunity which the pandemic has created and which is making us all introspect on, as I said, how we live and how do we do business, to consider whether we need to change something. That the economy is down on its knees is apparent to everybody. That it was an inevitable consequence of the virus is also, I think, pretty obvious because given the size of the Indian population, the density of people in cities, the way people live 4, 6 people in a room, the poverty and the lack of medical facilities, there was no other answer except this lockdown. But the lockdown has extracted a huge price from the economy. And it is for us now to see how do we use this situation to create an Indian industry which will now be globally competitive to not only get rid of the weaknesses which we've had in the past, but to use what has become apparently very clear to all of us as a means of becoming more productive now in the pandemic period of how to become really competitive. The automobile industry particularly is important because it constitutes almost 50% of the manufacturing sector. And what happens in the automobile industry to a large extent shapes what happens elsewhere. Most countries which grew industrially, whether it was USA, UK, Germany, Japan, Korea, China, have all ridden on the back of the automobile industry. And therefore, our industry has a particularly important role to play in industrializing India, making it competitive, creating employment opportunities. Now, what is it that we need to do, that we need to consider? One thing is pretty obvious to me, that what has been done in the last 70 years in terms of the way we have managed industry, the way industry and government have interacted with each other, is not going to work any further, and it needs to change. What I mean is that as far as Indian industry is concerned, we have always looked only towards the West for management technology. We have copied management practices, we have learned from business schools in the United States, and we have practiced what has been practiced earlier in the USA largely and the West generally. This needs to be considered. Is it something appropriate for India? We need to note that the USA is not a manufacturing nation anymore. Most of their manufacturing goods come from China. The West, generally barring Germany, is not a manufacturing country anymore, and Germany has a slightly different management style. And is it appropriate for us to follow the Western management style, or should we look East now and see how we can get lessons from the East, adapted to the Indian situation, and create an Indian management style which will be far more competitive in terms of its outcomes than what we have managed with the Western management style. I know it's very difficult to make mindset changes when we have been doing business in a certain manner over so many decades. But the pandemic has shown us how exactly that has been done by most of us in our way of living. If we can change our way of living so fast, surely we can change the way we manage industry and work our industry. The second thing which comes out is that government and industry have to work together. During this last 5 weeks, in some areas, industry and government have worked together in many ways. And the results of that have been outstanding. You know, we got into this business of manufacturing ventilators at the government instance. There was complete support from government. The result was that in a few weeks, we could reach a manufacturing capacity of 10,000 ventilators a month, when that company was not even doing 200 ventilators a month previously, not even in a year actually. So that is what can happen if government and industry work together. For government and industry to work together, the most essential thing is building of trust between industry and the government. This trust has been lost. It was lost initially during the license Raj period. It was lost because of corruption. It was lost because of tax evasion. It was lost because the whole system worked very differently, and productivity and competitiveness were not issues at that time. That has to change. And industry has a responsibility for doing things in a manner which will earn government trust. Another consequence of the working during that period of the license Raj was derived out of what I just said. This business of black money generation led to money being siphoned out of companies. People ran companies primarily for the benefit of their families, for themselves, and the future generations. They did not concentrate on the priority of building their companies itself as their first goal. That if ultimately the company becomes larger, becomes bigger, becomes more prosperous, then all of us will prosper. And you see the results of that today. Most companies in India, particularly in the MSME sectors where this business of very marginal profits in the balance sheet was almost universal, have all run into serious cash flow problems. They've never had a balance sheet which supported growth, which supported better technology, which supported better manpower, which supported better products. And that today has shown up in the short period that the staying power of industry is almost nothing. The industries are really living from hand to mouth. They have a very short time span during which they can function. If the going is good, everybody is good. The moment the going becomes difficult, difficult times come, we find it difficult to carry on. And that is because we have not concentrated on building the internal resources and the reserves of companies. It's necessary that today industry, and I'm including the automobile industry in that, not only the OEMs, but I'm including the vendors, the tier one, tier two, tier three, all of them have to concentrate today on generating maximum internal resources in their companies. These expenditures which they incur on company accounts, on overheads and such things have to be reduced. All that money has to be put back into the company. Sure, you'll be paying higher taxes, but then tax rates have come down significantly. And that helps to follow a cleaner way of doing business. If we build stronger companies, if we concentrate that over the next few years, let's bigger and bigger and more prosperous companies with strong balance sheets, strong reserves, then I think we will be able to change the whole cycle which has developed over these years of just carrying on as business as usual, not becoming competitive. The bureaucracy will, I think, have a different attitude. The politicians will have a different attitude. Building trust will become easier if they see that Indian industry is now concentrating on actually building industry rather than concentrating on seeing how they can lead a better life, a life with a more little bit of luxury, little bit of travel, and all the things which have been going on. So my suggestion at this stage is that we concentrate our discussions on this whole issue of building a competitive Indian industry, which will include the automobile industry. The automobile industry itself actually had a bad 1920. We know what happened for various reasons which have been discussed in the past. It's just unfortunate that when we were looking to revive in the current year, we've been hit by the pandemic. And this creates even a bigger challenge for an Indian industry on how to bounce back. And I think here it will have to be a combination of industry's own actions, which must create confidence in the public, in the government, in the bureaucracy, in the politicians, and which will actually strengthen the company. But this has to be backed by some actions by the government, which will enable the industry doing all this to actually take advantage and again become a strong sector which will lead the industrialization of India. And I think demand creation is the biggest issue for the automobile industry. I think the issue of affordability of cars is going to be an issue in the coming months. And I think that is something which government will need to look at and address because production volumes are going to be way below capacities. Costs of manufacturing are still going to be higher than in the past, in spite of what we do to reduce costs. And in that circumstance, if the demand position doesn't hold up, if we still have to give large discounts and things to sell cars, I think this industry will find it very difficult. So my request is government, industry need to work together, work in trust, work in confidence, and work to create a vibrant, dynamic, competitive Indian industry. Thank you very much. Let's leave it open for discussion now.
well for us. If I can pop one quick question to you before I
Sure.
bring in my co-host and the other panelists, because I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. You have served in government at a senior level, all the way in the core administrative machinery of this country, and you have been in the private sector for all these years. And you talked about this mindset reset, and you said a big step has been taken with the whole ventilator production of ventilators, where both sides have come together to bridge this trust deficit. So, how do you see, since you've seen both sides, the mindset reset, particularly in the bureaucracy, which seems for us, those looking from outside in, it seems to kind of shackle Indian industry in a big way, and the license Raj mindset still seems to hold very, very strong.
You are right, because firstly, I don't see a political consensus in India on how to take industrialization forward. I think individually, if you talk to different political leaders, they all say, yes, India needs to industrialize. But when it comes to public statements and public positions, I think there's no unanimity. And that creates confusion in the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy looks to see what the politician wants. The second aspect is, I think the bureaucracy has never been trained to think what business needs and what business does. Private business has always been an area of, let's say, suspicion of some sort, partly because of what industry has been doing. It's also a fact, as I said, tax evasion and corruption and all that. But partly also because government servants, right from the beginning, and I can say this from my own experience, were told that you should not get close to private industrialists. You should not have good social relations with them. At one time, this used to be part of our conduct rules, that having socializing with private industry was itself suspect. Now, all of that has to change, and it can only change both by the leaderships giving clear directions and changing the rules. Responsibilities of government servants should not become so difficult that they are suspecting that vigilance will come every time they do something to facilitate business. The facilitating of business should be a required KRA for government servants, not something which has to be done with great caution, so that the files show that you have taken every precaution not to help a private person.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bhargava. I will now like to welcome my co-host Devarshi Chakki, who will walk us through the rest of the conversation, the second half of the conversation. Devarshi, over to you.
Thank you, Anil. Joining us, thank you very much, Mr. Bhargava. It was really, very insightful to understand, where we are probably headed as an economy and also as a sector. Joining us in this discussion today is also Mr. Rajan Vadera. He is president of Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers Association. We have Mr. Vikram Kirloskar, President CII, and Mr. Rajiv Chaba. He is president and MD of AG Mobile. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'll straight away get to my most basic question that everybody is asking. As we enter our, the first early stage of, production, the lockdowns are kind of easing in many areas of the country, many regions of the country. A lot of people are asking, is the recovery likely to be gradual, or are you looking at a V-shaped recovery like we have seen in some of the past crises in history? I'll probably go to Mr. Vadera first. What do you think, sir? How is it going to be like for the industry?
Well, thank you, Debashri. See, if you really look at the year 1920, the way it has gone for us, overall, it has been about 18% degrowth. Passenger vehicle segment degrew by 18%. Commercial vehicles, there was a degrowth of 29%. Three-wheelers, 9% degrowth. And two-wheelers had about 18% degrowth. So with that kind of a degrowth and the problem that we are facing, and we are shut down almost now for a month and a half, we don't see likelihood of full volume, full capacity coming. This has to be also understood with the GDP figures and the GDP growth rates that are being talked of. we have had two scenario building. Scenario one is that if the GDP grows at 2 to 3%, then even in that scenario, we're talking of 18 to 24% degrowth amongst various segments. And God forbids if the GDP is flat or negative, then the degrowth will be as high as 35 to 40%, which means two very bad back-to-back years. And in such a circumstance, we will be almost reaching levels of a decade back volumes of 2010, 2011. Those would be the kind of volumes we will reach. Capacities will be at 50% utilization. And the kind of problem that you see on the demand side, supply side, okay, we can understand in a month's time, we'll be able to start, let us say, 50 to 70% of our production. But then the huge challenge, as Mr. Bhargav said clearly, is on the demand side. We need demand stimulus so that volumes can come back. And that's the biggest challenge that the industry is going to face.
Yeah, I mean the stimulus has been an issue for a while now. There are a lot of assumptions on how the stimulus should be. Let me go to Mr. Kirloskar, sir. I mean, you are the president of CII. How
is perfectly true. The first thing I think if we can change after this pandemic and the kind of crisis situation is we are in, we've learned the center and the states are able to work together. They're able to supply food. They're able to supply essential items across the country. Also, largely the opposition has been working with the government. I wish this will continue after the crisis is over. That will make one big difference, and that will enable us to push in big ticket reforms. A second is what he's talked about, trust. I entirely agree. Right from my beginning in CII, I've been saying we have to improve trust and respect between society and industry, society and government and industry. This kind of a triangulation is very, very important for us to go forward. Anyway, getting back to industrial growth. Besides the auto industry, we've been talking with various sectors. There are some sectors like the chemical industry. There's some companies which have been running at almost 100% through the crisis because of the requirement of essential items. A lot of the essential food producers have been running pretty well. Whilst there are others who have run at 40, 50%, a lot of the steel plants have been running even right through this and exporting largely to Japan. They've also been running at about 30, 40%. Auto has been zero, as was told. And a lot of the small businesses, small producers have been virtually zero. Pharma has been doing well. Agriculture looks pretty good. In spite of the situation, I think they managed to get the people out in time to start the harvest. So overall, economy, I don't see any chance of any great growth. It's going to come down. Auto sector down by 50% next year. And it's going to be a completely changed environment. For a large company, this is, like Mr. Bhargav said, if you built up your reserves. Some of us have been able to build up our reserves over the year. We have no debt. We can ride through for a couple of months, perhaps, but not more than that. And definitely not at 40, 50% capacity utilization. The fixed costs are too high. And then you will start thinking of how do you slash fixed costs. And the biggest problem, especially from the auto sector point of view, is the employment. We have a huge amount of employment, especially in the dealerships, which is phenomenal across the country. It's not just in the industrial areas. As the component manufacturers are in industrial areas, the car makers are in industrial areas, but the dealerships are across the country. And they're good businesses. They're all independent businesses, and they're under severe stress right now with the situation. So it's going to be a tough time with employment, I think, in the coming years ahead. At least one. I don't see the auto industry coming back to normal, some kind of vagary of, normal production till June 21.
So that's one part of one side of the pie. I mean, supply side, of course, it will probably get back to near normal going forward. Demand seems to be a big question here, and also adding to that, the entire experience, the consumer experience, the customer experience, probably will move to virtual from what we see today. How are the auto companies geared for that right now?
Well, first of all, I think we've just started opening our dealerships. My experience with our dealerships, I'm sure it's similar with, and I spoke with Rajan earlier also. He said we have started getting in people for service. Actually, quite a good amount. Wherever the dealerships have opened, people are coming into service vehicles. I was told on the commercial side, vehicle side also, commercial vehicles which have been used for the last 1 month, that people desperately need services to repair and maintain the vehicles. So that has started. And if you look at the structure of a dealership, service plays a very, very important issue in covering their costs and perhaps covering all their costs. So that's, if as service starts and people get some confidence in the safety of a dealership, I think there is some scope of buying. But I get up and I've been saying this to many shows. I can't imagine anyone getting up in the morning and saying, I want to buy a new car. That unless he desperately needs it for some reason or the other.
In fact, we are just getting some live comments. People actually, we may could end up seeing a different kind of picture. A lot of people are asking if car makers are going to give big discounts after the lockdown.
If they want to shut themselves off, they'll give discounts. I think the prices will rise. If you're going to run at 30-40% capacity utilization, unless you want to just commit hirakiri, you'll probably raise your prices and try to balance between what you are producing and what you can sell.
Mr. Chaba, you want to add to that? Started off in India.
Yes, I would say thanks for inviting me to this great forum. Mr. Bhargava, I'm talking to you through this probably after 15 years. I last talked to you when I was in GM. And Vikram, nice seeing you again. Rajan and I keep talking. So I think, I have a view that, let's talk about next 4 or 5 months. And I think first we need to agree that the government and industry has to decide that we need to move on with the coronavirus. We need to live with coronavirus, and we need to find a way. Obviously, we don't have to take any liberties with that. We need to be very safe, have all kinds of precautions, new SOPs, and all of us, I think, are doing that. So I think, but we need to get going now. Still we are finding it very difficult to open all our dealerships in many of the locations. All top locations, for the right reasons, probably are closed, but we need to find a way to open them. We are fortunate that we started our plant around 9 days back, but the supply chain is in a big, it's a big issue. We all know, Mr. Bhargava talked about tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Right now, as an example, for small one part on Bandi tube, we are stuck and we can't do it because Bandi tube happens to be in a red zone of Vadodara. So we can't start producing. So we are producing at probably 25%, 20% capacity at maybe 30% of our productivity. So the cost is a huge issue. So I think next 3 or 4 months, I think we need to think of a way to start operating. Even we are starting again from scratch. One car retailed today at one dealership and we are celebrating. Okay, it's not a switch on, switch off kind of a situation. When we switched off before the lockdown and suddenly it can be switched on now. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of struggle, a lot of pain, and then on top of it, if you don't have a clarity in policy and the government says, hey, if something happens in the factory, I'll close the factory for 3 months or I'll put CEO behind bars, then we have to ask the questions. If something happens in your constituency, who are the IAS officers, IPS officers, or the politicians responsible? Are they accountable the way you want to hold a CEO responsible for a factory mishap? So I think it goes back to the trust factor. I think we need to join hands, we need to collaborate, we need to work together. Also, we all know that GDP, automotive GDP is 8% or 9% of the economy. So Bhargava said 50% of manufacturing is automotive. If you take the whole value chain, and I call it in my own way R2R, raw material getting into the car till the resale price of the car. If you take the whole value chain, there are thousands of touch points. and the employment generation is huge. It's in the interest of the government. If they want more revenue, and by the way, they are revenue strapped, right? They don't have cash. So if they want revenue, it's a win-win situation to make sure that the auto industry starts getting revived. Despite all the challenges, exports have been amazing from India. Despite all the challenges, right? Most of the players are exporting from India. Why should we not encourage that? So in my opinion, I think it starts with what do you want to do? There used to be a healthy baby called automotive industry. You want to keep it healthy and in turn get benefited, or you want to make them weak and weak, thinking that they will do on their own. One factor which last year we talked a lot is we are trying to make a world class product, in India, thanks to our regulations, safety norms, pedestrian safety, emissions. So you want to give a first world product, but at a third world price. So coming to that point, how can we give discounts beyond a point? Okay, if somebody is desperate for some cash for some time, tactically somebody can do some kind of schemes, but that's not sustainable. So I think we need to have a holistic approach. One last thing I would say, that certain things which it struck with me what Mr. Bhargava said. When you talk about bureaucracy and things like that they need to change the mindset. The whole thing has to be. By the way, I had the fortune of starting this company from scratch, right, in MG. So we said, hey, listen, what philosophy can you have? Do I trust you unless you prove me wrong, or I don't trust you unless you prove me wrong? So most of our policies are unfortunately from the
industry and the auto industry can be. They've got together primarily on developing a vaccine for this coronavirus. They have not got together on developing all the products in which they're competing in the marketplace. It's not as if the companies are merging and going to have a second same brand for selling everything at the same price. That's not the intention anywhere. And I think in the automobile industry, the same problem holds. We are ultimately competitors for the market. And in doing that competition, everybody is looking to see how to develop an appropriate technology to compete more effectively. We have to compete in the global markets. Yes, if there's any one particular technology which is going to be universal, maybe industry can come together. But I think it's an extremely difficult thing to do in the automobile industry, to collaborate on one part like the pharma industry is doing. So I don't think it's a practical idea at all.
No, I understand. So right now, I mean, the understanding is that the entire focus of the industry, we have Mr. Kirloskar and also Mr. Vadera with us. So they will both agree that the entire focus of the industry has been to sort of get on the same plane with the government, as far as policy making is concerned, to get the approvals, to get things started is concerned. Now, going forward, assuming that things kind of smoothen out in the next few weeks, what are the key changes in terms of business models per se that the industry is likely to see? I'll ask that to Mr. Vadera first, and then I'll go to Mr. Kirloskar. He also runs a very successful car company.
Okay, Debashri, I think I must do justice to all my SIAM members, and I want to clarify that auto industry is not only cars.
Absolutely.
Auto industry is about two-wheelers, three-wheelers, small commercial vehicles, and big commercial vehicles. In fact, the proportion of other vehicles which are commercial in nature and largely two and three-wheeler which are used as personal transportation is very, very large. So therefore, I think if I look at the entire industry, I strongly feel that there is going to be development in the rural areas. When I say rural, it does not mean only agriculture. I probably see a pattern shifting where industries may move into clusters into the rural areas because of the migrant labor not coming. Maybe industry goes into an area where labor is easily available, where social distancing is not a very big problem. So when it comes to two-wheelers, three-wheelers, commercial vehicles, maybe there will be, as I call it, objects of mobility and objects of desire. So objects of mobility are going to have a completely different ball game altogether, and there is going to be very revolutionary changes that will happen. And within the other companies, automation is industry 4.0, huge amount of automation, because social distancing or physical distancing you can do up to a point, but beyond that it will not be possible. So coming back to the the present the issues that we are all facing, I think we will have to see things completely from a different perspective, whether it is our selling practices, whether it is our dealing with the labor practices. All of this will have to change, and the face of the industry will be very distinct for objects of mobility and objects of desire. And cars are largely objects of desire. And the shared mobility is also going to change. E-commerce is going to come up big way. So commercial vehicle may increase there. And as I think sometime back, we talked about, Mr. Chaba talked about GST collection. 1,50,000 crores is the GST collection. If we go down to 50%, collections will fall to 75,000 lakh crores. So to that extent, I think we are in a situation where industry needs stimulus, and government, we are in discussion with them, and I'm sure they will see logic of that. So that is the other part of the auto industry, which we should be also clear about, and different rules and different kind of equations apply in that commercial part of the industry.
Before we go to Mr. Kirloskar, I have a very basic question. A lot of people are saying that once we are out of the lockdown, and once of course till there is a cure or a vaccine, are we going to see higher sales of at least small cars, as people sort of shun public transport? They buy small cars and they go to their offices and workplaces. Do you think that is likely to happen, Mr. Kirloskar?
First, I think we must realize that the end of the lockdown means that we are getting enough hospital space. Okay? It doesn't mean that the crisis is over. Crisis may get even larger, but we have enough place to treat patients, enough ventilators, enough other sources of treatment, and enough space available. If you look around the country, you'll find a huge amount of empty hospital beds which have been created only for this purpose. And the main purpose of the lockdowns anywhere in the world have been basically for this. We are trying to control the spread of the virus, but we are also preparing ourselves in case after a lockdown and we start working, things may go up. So in view of that, I think if that doesn't happen, if the growth rate of infection doesn't increase and we are still able to keep a tight control on social distancing, the only thing that seems to work to reduce this is social distancing, washing your hands, and a mask, more than anything else. That's the main working point. If we can maintain discipline and maintain ourselves as responsible citizens, then I think we have a chance to get the economy wheel, which we are starting to rotate faster and faster. Whether we buy small cars or big cars, that's a question we are discussing all the time. Whether people, the pessimistic view is who's going to buy a car in the morning, and the second optimistic view is I don't want to drive in a shared car because I don't know what's left inside the car, so I'll buy one more car, or one more scooter or one more something. So I think both views are prevalent, and it's very hard for me to say which will, what's going to work. I think in different markets, it's going to look at things are going to be different, because where you see the maximum amount of shared mobility is also where you have the least maximum amount of traffic jams. And adding more vehicles on the road is going to make a big, it's going to change things. So that's my feelings. I think we have to just wait and watch the market. And you are asking about what will be our way of business in the future. Way of business there's a short-term way and a longer-term way. I think the short-term way, the next while the crisis is lasting, and especially until a vaccine comes down, or until the virus spread stabilizes to a safe, or where a human feels, a citizen of India feels it's safe to be around here, and he's not scared all the time. Until that point,
closer to the last year levels, hopefully after 8 or 9 months. But the fact is that this year industry will be down. We used to think worst case 20-25%, but now if the GDP of the country goes down by maybe -2, -3%, then it can be down by 50%, 40%. So nobody knows. And it means whatever levels of auto industry we have seen 7, 8 years back, we go back to that level. Now just imagine the capacities have been created in the country. So what happens to that capacity? What happens to the resources what we have generated in terms of manpower and dealer manpower? I think so. So the calibration has to be done to have the right size for the industry, capacity, resources, financing, and everything. So I think it will be a tough thing. But coming to the demand side, I think this is a great opportunity. And personally, I'll be very disappointed if the government doesn't do. It's a great opportunity for end of life cycle of vehicle, the scrappage thing, which actually combines everything what we have been talking so far. It takes care of the customer interest. It gives some stimulus to the industry, and also it takes care of the environment, because you're replacing the old cars, so Euro 2 or BS 2, 3, 4 with BS6 cars, more fuel efficient cars, more safe cars, better environmentally suited cars. So I think that stimulus of end of life cycle, if we can do it, it's a great opportunity for us to do it. Secondly, again, this is the customer demand side. I would say my personal viewpoint would be that from the customer perspective, if you think because the public transportation system is not the greatest in our country, and you may not like to take those systems because of the cleanliness issues, hygiene issues, and blah blah blah. So there should be some demand for it's a need actually. It's not that they are dying to buy the car, but it will be a need because of the poor urban transportation in our country. So I think some car demand will be there. I would like to bet on one more thing. Some guys have this concept of YOLO, right? You only live once. Now, they may say कि एक छोटे से virus ने इतना गड़बड़ कर दिया है. So what the hell I'm doing for all my savings and all? So even the top end cars, like the customers who are 50, 55, 60 years old, probably who have done all the savings in life and they're having a good life, they may like to indulge. They may like to buy more luxury products. And by the way, in China, if you see, April result has been very good, though the government has given stimulus there, by the way. Okay, so I think if we work smartly, I feel we can still try to improve from the current process. And some customers will go for the high-end products. Some customers should go for low-end products. And by the way, the shared mobility side, those guys are not sitting idle. They're smart guys. I'm sure every day they are thinking of what all they need to do to revive the demand in shared mobility. Very smart people, right? So they must be thinking of how do they create the barricade between the driver and the customer, the sanitizing of the car, the gloves with the driver, blah blah blah, all kinds of things. Because you need to tell the customer, hey, listen, you can trust me. We are giving you a safe working, safe car environment. The car solutions we are talking about, like we just did a tie-up with a medical company which has a world-class, which makes a world-class product for sanitizing the whole car cabin, and not only the air, but also it removes it from the surface. So those kind of solutions will come. A little bit of cost there. I think I think a lot of innovation would happen, in my opinion. A lot of new things will happen, but we need to work together. The point is, the government industry needs to work together. We need to have the right, whatever you call it, stimulus, the right policies, the right framework, and taking care of all the stakeholders, including environment.
So completely agree. Let me on that note ask Mr. Bhargav, sir. The auto sector has always been on the forefront of automation. Plants have been always fairly automated. How do you see this pandemic now? With the social distancing requirements in place, to what extent you think automation will take over? That there is also a human side of things there. There are employment issues concerned with that. What do you think is the way ahead then?
Well, let me talk of two things. We have been discussing demand, and let me make a comment on the demand side. The demand in India is constrained primarily because of affordability. The number of people who want to buy cars is extremely large, but they can't afford to buy a car, and they are perforce continuing to use two-wheelers. Let me give you the main reason for it. The main reason for it is the fact of taxation, which has its origins going back to our socialist days. The GST on cars in India ranges from 29% up to 50% for the big cars. In addition to this GST of 29 to 50%, the states levy a one-time road tax at the time of buying a car, which is from 4% to 20%. That's added to the GST. So you can see what that becomes. And then there's roughly a 3% cost of car, which is added again at the time of buying to pay for the third-party insurance. So it all adds up to a pretty high figure of 50% to 70%. Now, if I buy a car in the EU, the entire European Union, all I pay is 19% VAT. If I buy a car in Japan, I pay only 10% VAT. Now, as Mr. Vadera said, we have first world cars with all the features of the first world. But we have taxation which is 3 times, 4 times the first world taxation. How do you expect this industry to grow? This scrappage is fine, but scrappage only advances purchase decisions, does not increase the affordability of cars on any long period of time. And to my mind, I would much, much rather look at this whole cost of acquisition of a car, how to bring this down, how to make it more in line with what the global thing is than to do this. So that's my thing on the demand side, because without that, this industry is not going to go back to even last year's levels, frankly. I don't think it's going to happen. What was your second question?
I was asking about automation. As we go into production gradually, you see machines doing most of the work because social distance.
The problem with automation is that it's not something which you can do readily while continuing production. You can, but it requires a lot of planning of production, of project engineering. It'll require companies to find a lot of cash, which at this time is not so easy to come. It takes time to do it. People have to be trained. You'll have that problem with the unions that if you want to get rid of workers, that itself is going to create a problem. So I think any sudden increase in automation in existing factories is not going to happen. It can happen gradually. Some areas could get automated. But I think when new plants come up, certainly they are getting more and more automated. But don't expect that today's plant, which is largely manual somewhere, is in 6 months going to become a highly automated plant. It's not possible.
Mr. Kirloskar made a very interesting point. He mentioned that people are going to miss the blue skies, once this pandemic is behind us. What kind of innovations? Of course, EV. We were in fact wondering if the EV story is now sort of has been put on the back burner, because right now the focus is on survival. How would you see those innovations panning out in this current situation?
You're talking
You
with
want
me?
to answer that?
Yeah,
Vikram?
the question is to both of you.
Sir, go ahead, please.
Okay. The first thing which I think we keep repeating, but obviously it doesn't penetrate very much, is that cars particularly are not a major or even a minor source of pollution. If you look at both the studies done in Delhi by the IIT Kanpur and done by the TERI Institute, the pollution PM 2.5 from cars ranges from about 2% to 3%. The major causes of pollution have been building activities, roadside dust and construction on the roadside, burning of a lot of municipal waste, industries running, power stations, fly dust accumulation, and all of those things. Those have also come to a stop. So the blue skies are not happening because cars have stopped running. I think that needs to be kept in mind. Although every time there's pollution, the only cause of pollution, as I can see from the press and elsewhere, is cars. But it's factually data-based, totally wrong. And cars now will be, all new cars are BS6. BS6 is a very environmentally friendly area of friendly cars, and the pollution from them is even much lower. Yes, we have to worry about two-wheelers because two-wheelers consume 3 times as much petrol as cars do. And their pollution level rather is 3 times as much. And their numbers are much larger. And I think that's somewhere where we will now see that because they are becoming BS6, I think that area will get much more under control. Commercial vehicles from major cities have at least Delhi has ruled out most of commercial vehicles which used to enter here. And I think that area and buses and all will become electrified. But I don't see that in the near future, because of affordability factors, primarily infrastructure also, electric cars are going to play a major role in this country.
Mr. Kirloskar?
No, I tend to agree with Mr. Bhargav. You're going to see probably more electrification in two-wheelers and three-wheelers. The buses, I don't think long-distance trucks, you're carrying around batteries too much. It doesn't seem viable. You're just carrying a weight. If you look at a typical apartment block in Bangalore, there may be 200-300 apartments in a typical apartment block. Okay, and each of them have 3.7 kilowatts of power. If you have a car with 25 or 30 kilowatt battery, you can, if you want to charge it, if it's zero charge, you'll have to shut everything in your house for 10 hours. So you're talking of a kind of infrastructure requirement of just putting in wires and tubes, pipes to supply electricity, which is just not viable right now. If you want to charge that vehicle in 1 hour, you require 25 kilowatt connection or more, 25, 30 kilowatt connection. Where do you have it? Are there stories of people putting generating sets and charging the buses? What are we trying to do?
No,
Okay.
no, absolutely.
The sale of gensets to bus depots is increasing. I know. Yeah. This is for charging buses. It's the most crazy way of doing. So let's the oil prices are down. Oil prices are going to continue to be down, and that's going to be the other challenge to an electric vehicle. I think long-term electric mobility is going to be there in a large way. It's going to depend a lot on how you'll supply energy to the batteries or hydrogen or whatever that comes in the future.
I'll go to Mr. Vadera with the same question, and also to Mr. Chaba, because that's been the theme for the last few years. We are all going electric. Has the theme changed?
Okay. Debashri, the electric vehicle, as Vikram said, there is no business case with the oil prices so low, number one. And to that extent, I think the build-up is going to take a lot of time. But if I if I am, let us say, representing the country, and I'm saying that we need to be ahead of technology, and I think electric vehicle technology, which is in the nascent stages, is going to be an advantage for our country to leapfrog several uh, years ahead of others. This is one area where our country can take the lead. And if government wants to convert, move from pollution to energy security of the oil, dependence of oil, very, very large extent. Therefore, electric vehicle technology, I think, will continue to get pushed. It is a golden opportunity to create local supply chain in India, give incentives. It is the time where we can move from manufacturing to R&D and product development. It is something which can be having common parts across. Some earlier question you asked, where can common R&D technology happen amongst OEMs? I think it happens in those countries where the component manufacturers are able to give you design and components which can go in several cars. I think the time is coming where the component manufacturers will get an opportunity to develop parts which are common across platforms. So I do see a place for electric vehicle technology coming, but maybe individually it will may not make a business case because of the oil prices. But I think it's a golden opportunity not to miss it. Maybe it will take a break for a year or two, but it is, if the government is wishing to be a global player and not miss the opportunity and have a global and have a domestic supply chain, I think this is an area of indulging and getting stimulus and going ahead with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. The buck seems to be stopping with the government in the entire discussion. So, Chaba, you want to add to this?
Two things. When we say oil prices are going down, we need to see, we need to ask a question: is oil price going down for the consumer in India? Will it ever go down? Right? Because the government wants to, rightly so, probably they want to rake in the profits and they want to rake in the money because they want to have their reserves. So even if the price has gone down, our retail price of the oil has not gone down that much, right? So that's one thing. Second thing is, I think we owe ourselves, this industry we owe ourselves a clear energy policy framework for the automotive industry. I think that's the future globally. I think we can't wish it away from India. And whereas in India, we need a very local, customized Indian solution, what suits our country. So it means there has to be a coexistence of CNG to other gas-based or ethanol-based, and even EV and new forms of new energy vehicles. We need to have that kind of a mix. And also we need to take care of the national interest in terms of not not placing our interest in some one particular technology, or put all the resources in one particular area. As an example, even when we import oil, we have a basket of oil, right? We get from Oman or Brent combination and Dubai combination. Likewise, in the hybrids or EVs, whatever you want to do, there are various global players. There are Chinese, there are Japanese, there are Koreans who are good in EV technology. And by the way, in the battery, there's a second usage of battery. There are lots of
we actually ran out of time, but I just wanted to pop a quick question, the final question actually to Mr. Bhargava. It's on the stimulus. So if Mr. Bhargava, if and when, like Mr. Kirloskar says, it's still a pie in the sky, the government does decide to carry out the long promised stimulus, what would you see? I mean, what do you envisage? How should it be structured and how should it be ordained?
Well, my view has been expressed earlier. I would like an immediate reduction in GST. I would like the states to make the charge on road tax to be an annual charge, not a one-time charge at the time of buying a car. And I would like the 3-year insurance paid again to become an annual charge, so that at the time of buying a car, the customer only pays the lower GST and nothing else. The rest all are annual charges.
Great. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I think it's been a fantastic show. We would love to take this to 2 hours, but we have a time constraint. So, and I think all of you have shared the pivot and perish mantra and how we can go forward. It's a very tough journey ahead. So we have all accepted that to begin with. And to our viewers, please keep track of our webinars. We'll be back again with the Pivot and Perish second episode. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.